Standing outside the grand ballroom, I clutched my wedding invitation with trembling fingers. My heart pounded as I stared at the elegant double doors, knowing I would walk in alone while everyone else had their perfect plus ones. The complicated relationship with my sister Stephanie had always been a source of pain, especially with our family's constant comparisons. But today felt different somehow. I took a deep breath, hoping this wedding might finally change things between us. Before I tell you what happened in that fateful wedding hall, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Do not forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories like this one. Now, let me take you inside that ballroom where everything changed forever. I pushed through the ornate doors into the most breathtaking wedding venue I had ever seen. The grand ballroom at the Ritz-Carlton sparkled with thousands of fairy lights woven through white roses and baby's breath. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow prisms across the marble floors, and nearly 200 guests filled the space with elegant chatter. My sister Stephanie stood near the altar in her custom Vera Wang gown, looking absolutely radiant as she posed for photos with her bridesmaids. Making my way to the family table, I immediately noticed the whispers starting. "Oh, look, she came alone again," I heard someone murmur behind me. My mother Helen, dressed in a stunning navy blue mother-of-the-bride dress, barely acknowledged my arrival with a curt nod. Her attention remained focused on greeting the other guests and showing off her successful married daughter. My father, Richard, imposing in his black tuxedo, glanced at me with that familiar look of disappointment I had grown accustomed to over the years. My younger brother, Derek, sat with his girlfriend, Madison, both looking uncomfortable as I approached their table. Madison whispered something in Derek's ear, and he shifted awkwardly in his chair. Even my extended family seemed to regard me with a mixture of pity and embarrassment. Aunt Patricia leaned over to Uncle David, shaking her head sympathetically, as if my single status was some tragic condition that required their concern. The worst comment came from my 80-year-old grandmother, Eleanor, who never bothered to lower her voice. "At least Stephanie knows how to keep a man," she announced loudly enough for half the table to hear. The other relatives chuckled, and I felt my cheeks burn with humiliation. Cousin Robert and his wife Jennifer exchanged knowing glances, while Uncle Thomas made some joke about needing to set me up with his accountant. As the ceremony approached, I found myself relegated to the back row, while immediate family members took their seats in the front. Stephanie's best friend Jessica, her maid of honor, made several pointed remarks about my dating situation to the other bridesmaids within earshot. "Some people just are not meant for relationships," she said with fake sympathy. I tried to join conversations, but every attempt was met with polite dismissal or awkward silence. Sitting alone in that back pew, memories of my childhood flooded back. Growing up, Stephanie had always been the golden child. She was prettier, more popular, and seemingly better at everything that mattered to our parents. While she dated the captain of the football team, I buried myself in books and academic achievements. While she was crowned homecoming queen, I was building the foundation for my successful career in marketing. The constant comparisons had shaped my entire life. Every family gathering became a report card where Stephanie's accomplishments in beauty and romance overshadowed my professional success. Even landing my dream job as a senior marketing manager at a Fortune 500 company could not compete with Stephanie's engagement announcement. Our parents practically glowed when discussing her upcoming wedding, but my career achievements barely warranted a congratulatory phone call. What none of them knew was the secret I had been keeping for 6 months. My husband, Alexander Blackwood, CEO of a billion-dollar tech company, was currently on a crucial business trip in Tokyo. We had married in a private ceremony in Tuscany with only 2 witnesses present. I had made the decision to keep our marriage secret, wanting to prove myself to my family first, to show them that their constant criticism and comparisons had not broken me. The wedding ceremony itself was beautiful, though I watched it through a haze of hurt and isolation. Reverend Thompson spoke eloquently about love commitment and the importance of family support. As Stephanie and Marcus exchanged vows, promising to love and honor each other, I could not help but think about my own secret wedding 6 months earlier. The joy on their faces reminded me of that magical day in Italy, when Alexander and I had promised ourselves to each other under the Tuscan sun. But my moment of peaceful reflection was shattered when I noticed how deliberately I had been excluded from the family photos. While parents, grandparents, and siblings gathered around the happy couple, I remained seated forgotten. The photographer did not even glance in my direction, clearly having been instructed about which family members were important enough to include. During the cocktail hour, my isolation became even more pronounced. I stood alone at the marble bar, nursing a glass of champagne while conversations swirled around me. Stephanie's college friends formed tight circles, discussing their marriages, children, and successful husbands. When I attempted to join their conversations, they would politely acknowledge me before quickly returning to topics that excluded me entirely. The most painful moment came when I overheard Stephanie's sorority sisters discussing me near the restroom. "It is so sad," one of them said. "She is almost 30 and still cannot find anyone. I feel bad for their parents." Another added, "Maybe she is too picky. Some women just need to lower their standards." Their words cut through me like knives, especially knowing that I was actually happily married to an incredible man they would never meet. My cousin Robert approached me during dinner prep, clearly having been designated as the family member responsible for addressing my situation. He suggested I try online dating offering to help create a profile that might attract more realistic prospects. Uncle Thomas joined the conversation, recommending that I consider expanding my geographic range, since the local dating pool might be too limited for someone with my particular circumstances. Even the wedding planner seemed to pity me, asking if I needed help finding transportation home since I had arrived alone. The assumption that I could not even manage basic logistics of attending a wedding stung more than I expected. Every interaction reinforced the narrative my family had created about my inadequacies and failures as a woman. The breaking point came during a private conversation with Stephanie in the bridal suite. She had pulled me aside under the pretense of sister-to-sister bonding, but her words revealed her true feelings. "Gloria, I know you must be struggling watching me get married," she said with fake concern. "It must be so hard being here alone while everyone else has someone special." Her voice dripped with condescension disguised as sisterly love. "Maybe you should consider changing your approach," she continued, applying another layer of lipstick. "I mean, I have always been able to attract men because I make an effort. You focus so much on your career that you forget what really matters." Her words felt like a slap across the face, especially coming from someone who had never had to work for anything in her life. I tried to defend myself, explaining that I was happy with my life and career choices, but Stephanie cut me off. "Look, Gloria, I love you, but your presence here alone is honestly embarrassing for our family. People are asking questions and I do not know what to tell them." The cruelty in her words, delivered with a sweet smile, showed me exactly what she thought of our relationship. As I returned to the reception, I carried the weight of her words and the reality of my family's perception. They saw me as a failure, a cautionary tale, someone to be pitied and discussed in whispered conversations. What they did not know was that my husband was trying desperately to finish his meetings in Tokyo and fly back for the reception. Alexander had promised to try, but international business deals could not always accommodate family wedding schedules. The evening reception began with all the traditional fanfare. The DJ introduced the wedding party with flourish, each couple receiving enthusiastic applause as they entered the ballroom. My parents beamed with pride as they were announced, followed by Derek and Madison, then the grandparents and extended family. When my turn came, the DJ's voice seemed to carry an undertone of pity. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Gloria, the bride's sister." The scattered applause felt hollow, and I caught several guests exchanging glances that spoke volumes about their thoughts on my single status. I forced a smile and waved, but the humiliation was growing with each passing moment. Taking my assigned seat at the family table, I tried to focus on the beautiful decorations and the joy of the celebration, but the whispered comments and sideways glances made it impossible to relax. Dinner conversation centered around relationships, marriages, and future family plans. Madison excitedly discussed her and Derek's engagement timeline, while my cousins shared updates about their children and anniversary celebrations. Every topic seemed designed to highlight what I was missing, what I had failed to achieve in their eyes. When anyone addressed me directly, it was usually to ask about my dating life or offer unsolicited advice about meeting someone. The traditional toasts began after the main course, and I listened as Marcus spoke lovingly about finding his soulmate in Stephanie. His words were genuine and heartfelt, painting a picture of their perfect courtship and bright future together. When he mentioned the importance of family support and how welcomed he felt by our parents, I felt another pang of isolation. No one in my family had ever expressed that kind of enthusiasm about my life choices or relationships. Then came the moment that would change everything. My father, Richard, emboldened by several glasses of wine and encouraged by the reception's jovial atmosphere, decided to take the microphone for an impromptu speech. His voice boomed across the ballroom as he stood commanding everyone's attention with his characteristic confidence. "I want to say a few words about family." He began, his voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "Stephanie has always made us proud with her choices, her beauty, and now her wonderful marriage to Marcus." The crowd applauded enthusiastically, and Stephanie glowed under the praise. "She represents everything we hoped for in a daughter." Then his gaze found me across the room, and his expression shifted slightly. "Now my other daughter, Gloria, is also here tonight," he continued, and I felt my stomach drop as I sensed what was coming. "Gloria has always been our special child. She is so independent, so focused on her career, that she could not even find someone to bring to her own sister's wedding." The words hit me like a physical blow. Laughter rippled through the crowd, starting with nervous chuckles and building to genuine amusement at my expense. Guests turned to look at me, some with pity, others with the cruel satisfaction that comes from witnessing someone else's humiliation. My face burned with embarrassment as 300 people absorbed my father's public declaration of my inadequacy. Unable to bear another moment of the humiliation, I stood abruptly from my chair, my legs shaking with a mixture of anger and hurt. The sudden movement caught everyone's attention, and the laughter died down as guests watched my reaction. My father, perhaps realizing he had gone too far, set down the microphone, but the damage was already done. I needed to escape to find somewhere private where I could process what had just happened. But as I headed toward the exit, my father intercepted me, his face flushed with alcohol and righteous indignation. "Where do you think you are going?" he demanded, his voice still loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "You are not going to embarrass this family any more than you already have." The confrontation escalated quickly. "I am not the one causing embarrassment," I replied, my voice shaking with emotion. "You are the one who just humiliated me in front of 300 people. But Richard was beyond reason, his anger fueled by years of disappointment and the public setting that made him feel he needed to assert control. "You have been embarrassing this family for years," he shot back, his voice rising. 28 years old, and you cannot even maintain a relationship. Tonight was supposed to be perfect, and you are ruining it just by being here alone." His words were brutal, designed to cut deeply, and they succeeded beyond his expectations. In his rage and humiliation, my father did something that shocked even him. He placed both hands on my shoulders and shoved me backward with surprising force. I stumbled my heels, catching on the marble floor, and fell backward into the ornate fountain that served as the ballroom's centerpiece. The impact sent water cascading over the sides as I crashed into the decorative pool. The cold water was a shock to my system, soaking through my navy cocktail dress immediately. I sat there in the fountain, water up to my waist, my carefully styled hair now dripping wet and my makeup running down my cheeks. The silence that followed was deafening, every single guest staring at the spectacle I had become. Then something unexpected happened. Instead of the gasps of horror I might have expected, the guests began to applaud. Slowly at first, then with increasing enthusiasm, the entire reception gave my humiliation a standing ovation. They clapped as if my public degradation was the evening's entertainment, as if watching me be pushed into a fountain was the perfect conclusion to my father's speech. Stephanie stood on the ballroom's balcony level, laughing alongside Marcus and her bridesmaids. My mother made no move to help me, instead looking mortified by the scene her husband had created. The applause continued echoing off the high ceilings and marble walls, each clap feeling like another blow to my already shattered dignity. But in that moment, sitting in the fountain with water dripping from my hair and dress, something inside me shifted. Instead of breaking down completely, I felt a strange sense of clarity wash over me along with the fountain water. I looked around at all the faces staring at me with amusement, pity, and satisfaction, and I made a decision that would define the rest of the evening. Slowly, deliberately, I stood up in the fountain water cascading off my dress and creating small puddles on the marble floor. I pushed my wet hair back from my face and looked directly at my father, then at each family member who had contributed to this moment. The applause began to die down as guests sensed something significant was about to happen. With a voice that carried clearly across the now silent ballroom, I spoke words that would be remembered long after the wedding cake was cut. Remember this moment. All of you, remember this very moment. My tone was calm but firm, carrying a weight that made even my father take a step back. The silence that followed was complete and uncomfortable. Guests who had been laughing moments before now shifted nervously, perhaps sensing that they had participated in something more cruel than amusing. My words hung in the air like a promise or a warning, and the celebration's joyful atmosphere evaporated entirely. I made my way to the hotel's elegant lobby bar, leaving a trail of water droplets across the marble floors. The bartender, a kind woman in her 50s named Maria, immediately offered me towels and a warm blanket. She had witnessed the commotion and expressed genuine sympathy for what had happened. "Honey, that was not right what they did to you," she said softly, helping me dry off my hair. Sitting at the bar in my damp dress, I felt a strange sense of peace despite everything that had occurred. The humiliation was still fresh, but I also felt liberated somehow, as if my father's public cruelty had finally freed me from caring about their approval. I ordered a coffee to warm up and tried to process the events of the evening. 20 minutes passed as I sat there, occasionally glancing toward the ballroom where the reception continued. I could hear music and laughter, the celebration apparently recovering from the fountain incident. My phone buzzed with a text message, and my heart leaped when I saw Alexander's name on the screen. "Landing in 10 minutes. Car is waiting. How is the wedding?" His message read. I quickly typed back, "It has been interesting. I will explain when you get here." What I did not mention was that he was about to walk into a situation that would test both of our patience and his diplomatic skills. Outside the hotel's grand entrance, I watched through the floor-to-ceiling windows as three black vehicles pulled up to the valet station. The lead car was a Bentley Continental, followed by two Mercedes S-Class sedans. Even from a distance, I could see the hotel staff straightening their posture and preparing for the arrival of someone obviously important. Alexander stepped out of the Bentley looking absolutely stunning in his perfectly tailored Armani tuxedo. At 34, my husband commanded attention wherever he went, not just because of his wealth, but because of his natural presence and confidence. His dark hair was slightly tousled from the long flight, but he still looked like he had stepped out of a magazine cover. Behind him emerged his personal assistant, David, and two members of his security team, all dressed in coordinated dark suits. The hotel's concierge immediately approached, clearly recognizing Alexander despite the late hour. I watched as they exchanged pleasantries, the staff treating him with a deference reserved for their most valued guests. From my position at the bar, I could see the exact moment when curious wedding guests began noticing the commotion outside. A few people had stepped onto the hotel's terrace for air and were now pointing toward the impressive convoy. Someone must have recognized the Blackwood Industries logos discreetly displayed on the vehicles because whispers began spreading through the crowd. Alexander entered the hotel with his characteristic confident stride, scanning the lobby until his eyes found mine at the bar. His expression immediately shifted from business mode to concern as he took in my still damp appearance and the obvious signs that something had gone wrong. He crossed the space between us in quick strides, his security team hanging back respectfully. "Sorry I am late, darling," he said, leaning down to kiss me softly on the forehead. How was the wedding? His voice carried just enough warmth and affection that Maria the bartender smiled knowingly behind the bar. Up close, I could see the exhaustion in his eyes from the 15-hour flight, but his attention was completely focused on me. I gave him a brief summary of the evening's events, watching his jaw tighten when I described the fountain incident. Alexander had met my family once before during our engagement period and had not been particularly impressed with their treatment of me even then. Hearing about their behavior tonight clearly tested his usually excellent diplomatic composure. Meanwhile, the wedding guests, who had noticed his arrival, were beginning to piece together his identity. I could see phones being pulled out as people discreetly Googled Alexander Blackwood and Blackwood Industries. The whispers were growing louder as information spread through the reception about exactly who had just arrived at their hotel. My father, Richard, and mother, Helen, had apparently been informed about the new arrival because they appeared in the lobby within minutes, both looking slightly frazzled and concerned. Behind them came Stephanie and Marcus, clearly having been pulled away from their own reception to investigate what was happening. The entire family stood clustered near the ballroom entrance, staring at Alexander and trying to process this unexpected development. "Should we go say hello to your family?" Alexander asked, straightening his tie and preparing to face what he knew would be an awkward situation. His business background had taught him to handle difficult people with grace, but I could see the protective anger in his eyes when he looked toward my relatives. We walked hand in hand toward the group, my still damp dress leaving occasional water spots on the pristine marble floor. The closer we got, the more obvious it became that my family was struggling to process this turn of events. They had spent the entire evening discussing my failures and inadequacies, and now I was approaching them with one of the most successful businessmen in the country. Alexander extended his hand to my father with perfect politeness. "Good evening, Mr. Patterson. I am Alexander Blackwood, Gloria's husband." The word husband seemed to echo in the sudden silence that followed. My mother actually gasped audibly, while Stephanie's face went completely white beneath her carefully applied wedding makeup. The transformation in my family's behavior was immediate and complete. Richard, who had been loudly proclaiming my inadequacies just minutes earlier, suddenly became obsequiously polite. "Mr. Blackwood, what an unexpected pleasure." He stammered clearly, struggling to reconcile this reality with everything he had said about me that evening. Helen immediately began apologizing for the misunderstanding earlier, as if pushing me into a fountain had been some sort of miscommunication rather than deliberate cruelty. Stephanie attempted to engage Alexander in conversation about the wedding, pretending that she had not spent the entire evening treating me like an embarrassing family secret. But Alexander's response was politely cold. "I think we will be leaving now," he said calmly, his arm protectively around my waist. "Gloria has had quite enough family time for one evening." The subtle emphasis he placed on the word family made it clear that he had heard about their behavior and was not impressed. As we turned to leave, I caught sight of the wedding guests who had gathered near the ballroom entrance to witness this confrontation. The same people who had applauded my humiliation now stood in stunned silence, clearly realizing they had misjudged the situation entirely. Their faces showed a mixture of embarrassment and regret as they processed what had just occurred. The final moment came when Stephanie called out desperately, "Gloria, wait, we should talk." But I did not turn around. Instead, I walked out of that hotel on the arm of my husband, leaving behind the family that had never truly valued me. The sound of our footsteps on the marble floor was the last thing they heard from me that night. 6 months later, I had built a life that truly reflected my worth and values. Alexander and I had bought a beautiful home in the hills where I finally felt the peace that had eluded me for so many years. My career had flourished under his supportive encouragement, and I had been promoted to vice president of marketing at my company. The members of my family had made numerous attempts to reconnect, sending letters, emails, and even showing up at my office building, but I had learned the difficult lesson that some relationships are too toxic to salvage, even when they involve family. Setting boundaries was not cruel. It was necessary for my mental health and happiness. My father's words that night had been intended to humiliate me, but they had actually set me free. In pushing me into that fountain, he had washed away years of self-doubt and people-pleasing behavior. I learned that I did not need the approval of people who fundamentally did not respect or value me, even if those people shared my DNA. The most important lesson I learned was about choosing your real family carefully. Alexander became not just my husband, but my true family, the person who celebrated my successes and supported me through challenges. Real love does not require you to diminish yourself to make others comfortable. True family lifts you up, rather than tearing you down for their own amusement. Today, when I look back at that fountain, I realize it was not just washing away water and makeup. It was washing away the chains of expectation and criticism that had bound me for far too long. Sometimes the most painful moments in our lives become the catalyst for the most profound positive changes. That fountain did not just clean off the humiliation of that evening. It cleansed me of the need to seek love from people who were incapable of giving it freely and unconditionally. And in that freedom, I finally found the happiness that had always been waiting for me. What is the most important lesson you have learned about setting boundaries with toxic family members? Have you ever had to choose between keeping peace and protecting your self-respect? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and do not forget to hit that like button if this story resonated with you. Subscribe for more real-life stories about finding strength in difficult situations, and share this with anyone who might need to hear that they deserve better treatment from the people in their lives. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your worth is not determined by others' inability to see your value. May you always have the courage to choose relationships that honor the amazing person you truly are.